Good evening, everybody. I'm Mick Baraz and I'm with Ghostteq. Tonight I want to break away from the common, normal video backgrounds that we usually do with the other tapes that were in reference to paranormal, and I just want to talk about a generalized subject, and that's on ghosts. Ghosts, spirits, apparitions, things of that nature, things that everybody takes for granted and always seems to manage to hyper-exaggerate the whole concept behind the paranormal, and that is they take their initiative in exaggerating, saying that spirits are demons. That's not always the case. Matter of fact, 99% of the time they're not demons at all, but in actuality they're actually spirits who were in some essence at one time or another a human being, like myself, that eventually one day, or eventually, we're all going to pass, and probably, believe it or not, maybe some people don't believe it, but myself, yeah, when you do pass, there's two entities within the body, and that is the physical form, which is the finger, ow, and then there's the spiritual form, the spirit, the essence, the aura, the soul, all of which people take for granted, and when they create things like, say for an example, they get together with others and they decide, hey, let's make a team for the paranormal. Instead, let's call it ghost hunters, or let's call it ghost chasers, or let's call it anything that's related to ghosts in general. But you got to think about in the aspect of, would you like to be chased? If you happen to be a spirit, if you were a ghost, if you were an entity, if you were an apparition, and someone comes running at you with a camera and telling you, do something, throw something at me, I dare you, or calling or cussing, or running, or cussing at the spirit or whatever, naturally that's going to get somebody ticked off, just like it would normally do if somebody was, well, let's say, a physical being. Would you go up to a person and call them an asshole? No, I don't think so. Not with the mindset that if you're not willing to get punched in the face, or even worse for that matter, you're not going to do that. So why would you do that disrespectfully to an entity, to a ghost, to a spirit, to an apparition, not knowing what its history is, how it became there, how it ended up there, how it died, if anything for that matter, and how it got in the position where it's at, or for that matter, how it got into your home, or into the place that you're going to. Do you think that maybe if you went to some, say for a ship or a mansion, a lot of paranormal teams, they figure if they want to do all the hype thing by going to the most scariest places in the country, the most scariest places within a state, the scariest places within their city or their hometown, do they think, oh well, we've heard it from all the advertisements on the TVs, the commercials, and all these shows that you see on YouTube about teams that go to this one mansion, to the devil's stomping ground. Believe me, my friends, it's not as cracked up to be, because I've gone there several times, and you know what it is? It's just a simple piece of round, it's not even totally round for one thing, and it's just dead ground where somebody says that the devil himself went stomping on the area and did their incantations or whatever, things of that nature, and that's how he managed to do whatever demons do. But if you go out there like I have, you're going to find something there. You're going to find just a bunch of beer cans and some cigarette butts and party favors and whatever else when somebody goes out there to have a good time. But nothing paranormal. Not that I'm saying that it's not going to happen, because maybe it has happened for some. Just like if you have gone to the train tracks, the trellises, where people have taken their demise in buildings, hotels. That's happened right matter of fact, right in Fayetteville. there's an area where there was a hotel where some woman committed suicide, jumped out the third or fourth story building, and so from that point on, paranormal teams have been coming all over the place trying to find out. Of course, we tried that ourselves when we had teams. You know, we were together. I myself was together with like 3 or 4 different teams, 2 upon which that I co-founded myself, but I won't get into that. But let's get back to the subject at hand, which is ghosts. Do you believe them or you don't? Do you think that, well, once we pass, we're past. That's it. Some people believe just that. Once you're put in the ground, you don't hear a thing. But you know what? One of the things comes to mind is now, I saw on a commercial not too long ago, matter of fact, they were talking about, I can't remember what the disease was. I think it was something, I wish I remember what it was. But in any case, it was some form of mental illness that a person might have. And that, in essence, is what causes a lot of people to see hallucinations. Now, don't get me wrong. Some things of that effect do actually happen. And there are illnesses out there that can cause a person to hallucinate and cause them to see spirits or ghosts or somebody walking through a wall, for that matter, or, you know, and it does happen. But there's other things as well that can cause that, you know, in your home, and cause a person to think that they're seeing something when they're not. And that's, let's say, EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies. I can't even say it right. Electromagnetic frequencies. And what that is it's electronic impulses that is put out with the emissions of any electronic object that you have in your house. And that can be anything at all. Some emissions are higher than others. Let's say, for an example, a radio, a microwave, a sauna, a hot tub, what do you call it, those, I can't remember, you know, a tanning bed, yes. I remember one instance that me and the team, I went to this woman's house that she was apparently having some activity within her home. What it turned out to be, which most of us do, is to debunk, find out the actual cause behind the reasons why things are happening within their home. And in this instance, what had happened was, it was her tanning bed. Now, this woman had a tanning bed. It was your average size tanning bed, but was it maybe 8 or 9 foot, whatever fits, you know, a person can get into and get their tans or whatever. But in any event, this tanning bed was made back in the 70s, okay? Could you imagine something made back from the 70s? Back in the 70s, emissions weren't, electronic emissions were not even, they were, but they weren't as high of a standard of regulation that was a necessary thing in all equipment, electronics for that matter. And what it was, those emissions were so high, and on top of that, this woman had her tanning bed in her bedroom, okay? Her bedroom of all places. I know some people, you know, you're tired, you figure, oh, let me get a few rays of, you know, 40,000 joules of emissions into my skin core, and then I'll go to sleep. Well, you know what that does to a body, and not alone mention what it could do to your brain and make you think you're seeing things. But in any event, you get the general idea of what I'm talking about. And that's not to mention other things that can cause it. You know, radios, microwaves, refrigerators, it all depending on when the unit or whatever appliance it is that you bought. The newer ones were higher standards, so they can't actually emit as much as they do back then in the 70s and 80s. But also, let's take into consideration other things that can cause an effect in your mind, and that is things like thinners, paints. Went to another lady's house, and she was also, of course, experiencing these instances within her home. Now, normally we do what is called as a walk around, and we check out every section of the area with the permission of the resident, of the owner, of course. And whether this is residence or business, it's still the same procedure. And we do the walk around because basically this is, in essence, gives us an idea as to what maybe what's called debunking, and find out what could be the problem beforehand, before we decide to take on the case. If it's something that we can't quite figure, where there's some guesstimations there, there might be a few ifs and ands there, we'll still going to accept the case, because maybe later on within the evening during the casework we could find out some answers. But for the most part, usually beforehand we find out. When we're actually doing the initial walk around, we'll find out certain things. But anyway, back to the story I was telling you about, was this woman. She stayed out in Hope Mills, I believe. And we went there, and she was, like I said, she was having some activities in her homes that she claimed. And we went out there, and this woman has a 2-story home, 3 bedrooms, bath and a half, and an attic and a basement. And of course, in the basement, what happened was we went down into the basement, and this woman she must have had a good 40 cans of paint and thinners and shellacs and primers and a whole slew of chemical liquids in her basement. Almost to the half point of which a good portion of them were still open. The lids were not sealed completely, and therefore what happens is the fumes emit and they seep up and they rise. And what happens is her bedroom just happened to be above the base, that section of the basement, and happened to emit up into her room, which the ventilation goes, there's a direct ventilation that goes from the basement, of course. It goes strictly up to the living quarters and up into the attic, and of course her bedroom is in that vicinity as well. So she was taking in these fumes, which was causing her to hallucinate, which does happen if you read some instructions on the paint cans or whatever chemicals that tell you what these certain chemicals can cause. So that's a lot of them for that reason tell you to wear breather, aspirators, whatever, to protect yourself from the emissions. But anyway, that was pretty much the gist of what happened in that case. And after that point, she no longer, she reported to us, she no longer was experiencing anything, which was a good thing. So, but not to say that something could possibly happen, because in some instances things do happen, and they do result in us trying to figure out an explanation, a common explanation. Now, 3 forms of checking out whether or not those things do happen, you got to take into consideration. 1, structural, that there are things could be happening with the foundation of the home itself. Electrical, like I said, EMF emissions, could be happening. Even the wiring in the house could be causing the shortings in the wirings that cause some defects and effects as well. When you're plugging something in, then it causes that to emit even more. And then there's plumbing. And plumbing aspect, even though you might not think that there's really not too much about it, but it does play a part in paranormal, because people don't even think about the fact that a water drip or a silent seep in the water flow could cause someone to think of something, that could be there that's not really there. There's even underwater streams, roots, flows that underneath the household itself, the structure, a foundation, whatever, that can cause that, where there's underwater streams, underground streams, that also can play a factor in that, all of which has to be taken into consideration as well. Not to say, like I said, not to saying that anything paranormal doesn't happen, because there is that percentage of things that do happen as well, and that includes, even for the most part, even when you take pictures, there is a big department of that, a big factor in that department falls on the fact that a lot of people make the misconception that when you take a picture and you see something in it, that it's paranormal. 9 times out of 10, no. It can be debunked just like anything else. You know how many forms when people turn in a photo and say, oh, this is an orb. Well, if you really think about it, an orb is nothing but a spherical object, which can fall into any numerous amount of categories of things that can identify that one thing. And that could be moisture, that could be dust, that could be particles, that could be insects, all of those things that fall into that category of defining what an entity could be, or what, when you say it's an orb, it could be just that. And there's been many instances where we have analyzed data, and sure enough, in the video data, we see we're looking there at hours at a time, researching and analyzing this footage, and you're seeing every now and then you'll see something go like an insect, or if it's even an emotion where it certain glides along, which could very well be dust or a particle that the wind, where if there's an airstream in the house, naturally there's ventilation. People will think, and our air conditioning was off, our fans were off, so there was no reason for. Well, things do float, believe it or not. That there is a matter of airflow. Like, say, when I'm breathing, I am emitting a form of air trail. Let's say, like, for instance, there happens to be a dust particle right in front of me, even though I don't see it. You might see it later on in the video footage. And if I happen to exhale, and that little thing, it just trails off ahead of me, and someone happens to look at that footage, who's to say that they're going to sit there and say that that's paranormal? Of course, some people are going to say that because they don't know, not that they don't know, let me rephrase that. They're not knowledgeable enough to realize that there are certain things that can cause that very effect and not be paranormal. Now, there's the intelligent being, and then there's the, I can't even recall what the other one was right off the bat. But in any event, there's two forms of that, and there's that tell whether or not that's an intelligence form of spiritual being, or it's just a repeated event that has happened in some time, could be 10, 20, 30 years ago, could be last week, depending on when the demise took place. It could have been a horror of, an unfortunate event where that person passed on and died, and that chain of event that happened to that person repeats itself like a record player that goes over and over and over and over and over and over. Well, somewhere along that line anyway. But in any event, I was just trying to come across to you of all the different things that people saying about ghosts, and for the most part, ghost hunters and some paranormal investigators, I feel like there's a bit of a space there in between the two fields. Well, it's one field, but there's two titles, so to speak. There's ghost hunters, like I said, and then there's paranormal investigators. Some of the ghost hunters, I'm not saying all of them, okay, so let me get that out foremost, that tend to use the field as a form of entertainment. Entertainment meaning that they put something out there with the sole purpose of getting just that information, regardless what point or what it takes for them to get that information. And then if they do get something, they're going to exploit it to the fact that it's just basically like if you're watching a horror movie. Excuse me. Let's say if it was Amityville. Let's say if it was whatever, there's so many scary movies out there. I can't name all of them, but there's some out there that just happen to deal with ghosts, that they just totally exploit the whole matter completely, that it just does away with the whole concept of the paranormal field in itself that has to do with ghosts. And I think personally it's an insult, because those in the paranormal realm, paranormal investigators that go out there and actually take the initiative to respect the field and respect those that are in that realm, whether it be spirits, apparitions, ghosts, or whatever, respect the foremost thing that you do in the field. And that does not mean doing the opposite of respect, and that's being vain and egotistical and self-exploitive, and oh, let's put my face here because I am the star and I want you to see me because I'm going to find this ghost because I'm yelling at it to throw something at me. And then, pow, something happens to them, and then they're blaming the spirit because that spirit is pissed. And could have been more than a slap. Might have been like some on shows. They say throw something, and next thing you know, a brick is coming flying their way. But you get my point, right? Respect. And that's what it boils down to. You don't have to, say for example, also if you're creating a name for yourself, a name for your team, your organization, or your group, whatever it is, think of the whole idea behind the realm that got you there in the first place. And that doesn't mean, oh, let's create a name called Bobby's Ghost Bandits or Barbara's Ghost Chasers of America. Come on, try to think of something. That name that you create is what's basically going to tell others how you take the field seriously or not. I'm not saying that you can't be creative, which you can be because it does help if you are, because it differentiates you from others, but don't let it degrade you from others. That's my point. Don't let it degrade you from others, because see, what that does is the client is going to look at you like, okay, are they really serious, or do they just think this is a game? Okay? You know what I mean? But all in all, I just wanted to give those few select minutes of the thought, how I felt about ghosts and the field in general. And I know this is part of me, Ghost Gab, but I just wanted, like I said, just wanted to put that out there. And it's not my normal means of, doing the preemptive input of the show like I normally do. I just wanted to take a few moments to tell you how I feel about the subject at face value, and that's respect. Okay? So for me, Mick Barraza of Ghostteq, creator of Ghost Gab, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and have a happy and safe holiday